In terms of looking at the different art practices, that's wonderful. I mean, the more variety and difference there can be in the, the study of, say, the Chinese language and ideograms, and, looking into, I mean, all the poets, you can't get around, Ezra Pound's work, even though it's erroneous in parts, but that's very key, and he really brought, Chinese poetry and haiku and other things into the, into the consciousness. And the cantos is filled with, references. I was in China recently, and there was a Chinese scholar doing a whole lecture on all Pound's references to Chinese painting. And it was as if he was discovering it, for the first time. And then when I go to China, they're picking up on Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and the poetry of Frank O'Hara. And a young Chinese scholar was doing a paper on Charles Resnikov. I mean, I don't know if you even know who Charles Resnikov is, somewhat associated with the objectivist movement. And I said, what is your interest? She said, I'm so interested in the Jewish diaspora. Great. So I don't know anymore. I would, maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I would have given a different answer. But I, total respect for the incredible art practices and poetic practices and linguistic practices of, I feel it's much more sophisticated than our own, in a way.
So do you feel it's a lot of Buddhism as a very different kind of, mental mind, with, a different type of mindset than you're trying to
different mental mind, what does that mean? I think
it's kind of redundant. Do you feel like the mindset that it invokes, how
I don't know if it's a set. I wouldn't call it a set, because it's very fluid. That's the whole point, that it's not a set. That there's this multiplicity of...
Right. Well, okay, I guess it's facilitation and connection to soul. Does that make sense?
Well, there's no soul in Buddhism.
Oh, sure.
There's no there's no existence of that.
Facilitation to connection to understanding.
Consciousness.
Consciousness. Perfect, yeah. Do you feel it facilitates in a different way?
I think it opens up a way. I'm a very, I grew up in New York City. I'm very tied in, I think, to my culture. I've been so fortunate to have this, alternative path through poetry and, born at a time, a very exciting time, I think, in our culture, but also I feel a lot of responsibility. I remember with so many demonstrations with Allen Ginsberg, and then this feeling we'd failed. We failed the next generation. We failed in the 60s. We were so naive. They were doing their weaponry stuff while we were, out chanting mantras in the streets. And on the other hand, if you look at Occupy Wall Street, it's the mirror thing, which is so interesting. It's like this thing of waking the world up to itself. There's no hierarchy. There's no agenda. It's not a political thing. And yet it makes everything kind of raw and exposed. So you feel, once you're pointing out the 99% and you're in these, the Federal Reserve's down the block and these Deutsche Bank and this and that, and you're in the heart of it, it's all more exposed. And it makes you start thinking about, the wealth and how that, or, you think about your own reality and the reality of the people you know, and it just, it's like a teaching. And I've been encouraging that it become more like a free university, that this whole movement should really have an educational component, and it does, actually. Naturally, people show up there and give little discourses. The Buddhist scholar Robert Thurman was just, down there giving just a spontaneous discourse on Buddhist ideas. And I don't know if that answers your question. Yes?
It's interesting considering that you have these ideals being addressed again and all these issues being brought up down there. We have the Occupy Athens movement too, and they're actually having an exhibit here to help raise money for Occupy Wall Street. December 17th. Come on out, and it'll be up for a month. But I just heard from someone who's there that they have these high weaponry drones, not only the drones taking photographs, but these little robotic insects taking pictures of so-called, these are dissidents, these are like, school teachers and nurses protesting wealth inequity, and they're out there taking pictures of them. It's like Hoover, so I'm really glad you guys are there, and people, it's not just getting dropped, because it's becoming really strange, and I am totally with you in that the purpose of this kind of thing, the wake of that last poetry piece, I did want to ask you, she's so amazing, this performer. She reminds me of Julianne Moore a little bit, is putting your words in, you know, I grew up with poets, so, you know, there are poets who can read well and poets who just drone, and speaking of drones, and there's this idea of when you take it and you make it theater, in essence, you're sort of giving up your work to this, and I didn't know how she was directed or how she did that way, but it's not like a poetry reading, it's it's a movie, you know, and, and it really does wake you up. Every real expression on her face just brings the words to life in a way that a traditional reading really doesn't.
Right, well that was the point, I think, to try it in this kind of context, in a, you know, very different way of reading. And again, it's just a, you know, it's a small excerpt, and it's interesting what you can do, because there's space around it, and there are the visuals, and there are the edits, and so on, the ants, and things meant to, you know, tie into the so-called water war idea.
Well, that's a great segue. Right?
But let's see, there was some thought I had. Occupy, what was it? Any other final things I'll wrap up soon? Yes?
One quick one. Have you heard about the decolonized Wall Street movement?
Oh, no.
Well, what it is just some indigenous cultures have felt like the language of Occupy.
Right, they were down there. There was a group of Native American activists down there, and that was brought up. Yeah.
And some of the Occupy movements have had a referendum in it, or even kind of, you know, had like Occupy Boston, Occupy Oakland. They have a referendum in it, and I think it's very important because a lot of globalization, a lot of it, that's a lot of the foundation, you know. So it's just
right. No, I agree. And actually, young people, I have a student down there and poet friends who are involved with the library, and the view is that, you know, it's like a strange map. There's segregation. They feel that the black and the Hispanic are more with the drumming thing, and then the white intellectuals, and then, you know, the way the pundits come in, and then they have people that they talk to. Anyway, it's a little microcosm of this, you know, how do you create a more enlightened society? And so, but the Native American presence is, you know, people are showing up with their views and correctives, and, you know, it's very, very healthy. Okay, we have to move along. But all these things still go on, and I did have, where is it? There was just quickly, this is from another collaboration with the artist Donna Dennis. These are gouaches, and this was done, came out a few years ago from Steve Clay's Granary Press, but this was done after, it was some work she was doing after 9/11, and then I was responding to her work and created this thing called 9 Nights Meditation. And can't really see it very well. I did have some text here, I thought. Okay, well, we'll just look at these quickly. So she works with this sort of recurring telescope and the sense of a hill. Part of it is, there's a little litany here I can read. Patriot Act, patriarch, patriarchal, paternalism, paterfamilias, patronizing, paternity, pathology, pathological, pathetic, patron, padrone, patronage, patress, patriot, matriot, yeah. So a matriarchy, yeah, matrilineal, yes, matriarchs. And, you know, we were also, you know, with John Ashcroft's years, he once was coming to Wall Street, so I was able to go down there and read this thing, and you all know something about the Patriot Act. So that works in a little bit of that, and these are some of her other images. It's basically grays, whites, and blacks. I love the sense of the celestial, and an elephant got in there somehow. There's a reference. I mean, she kept playing with the images and writing and doing these images off the text as well. And we did have, I mean, there's an interesting sort of footnote at the back, or notes at the back about the process of the work, and you know, the inspiration for this 9 Nights meditation. It's actually a reference to an Indian text and some work of William Blake's that was up at the Metropolitan Museum. Anyway, that's just a taste. And then finally, there's...
The end piece or the other piece?
Yeah, let's look at the little bit of the Pat Steer. This is in process. I think I have a couple of lines. A piece from Pat. So she works a lot with this. Somebody here I saw knows Pat's work. You know, these huge, huge canvases. I mean, she's very incredibly heroic. She's up there with all those dead guys from the abstract expressionist. I mean, just that the scope and the plasticity of her work and the muscularity of her work. I'm not, you know, privileging male muscle or anything, but she's just right up. She's up on her ladder. I mean, they're as big as this wall, some of these pieces. So it began, you know, at her space, looking at some of the smaller drip works, going back and forth. I felt I was also around her, and it wasn't about her particularly, but it was a little bit about, you know, this two energies working together. I think when we started it, the artist Saul LeWitt had just died, and she had been, you know, his partner for a number of years, and so there was this sort of mourning going on. That creeps into the text. It's now turning into a large scroll. We thought it might be a fan, and now it's a scroll that we have to find the right person. Maybe we'll go to Chinatown. It could even go to China to be properly done. And I must say, these artisans who work at the Brodsky Center are so fastidious, and I mean, I really appreciate the making and their attention and love for this. I mean, I grew up with the Mimeo revolution, where you just type up a stencil and crank it out, and then, of course, you know, the fast way to publish as we all can on the internet, and of course Xerox and zine worlds. So it's very interesting to watch this. It feels so ancient. I feel like I'm really back with you know, a different kind of making. So you know, just go forward through them. I'll just read a little. Solar. Now hills meant the burden, meant the adverb, the proverbial, seek out the collector, arrays to catch meaning, meant sapphire, gold, meant diamond, dust particles from the gravitational collapse, hundreds of skeletons, and nebula meant stress in the teeth, meant pollen of Copan, of, you name it here, meant Mayapan down in 1450, the last long count, meant forests could recover. There was only that you is an other to every other, and that one comes from other, honor our lovers, concealing trickster roles, imago of ancestor, unimaginable imaginings that might recover themselves, but maybe not being irreparable, and the ground of 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 lifting stellar or solar power. But this is also form, stakes a claim on groundlessness, witness and image, erupts from the heart of marginalia, inbuilt mitochondrial restlessness, tragic versions of our art time, savoir-faire, sfumato, shot in the dark. But, so there's another morph of this, and I'll just play this last thing. So Ambrose, my son, we collaged, I don't know what the other text is, but I was reading the text separately, and then he collaged them into this piece called, parts of it also so it's from Cry, Stall, Gaze. This is the piece with Pat Steer that is not even made yet, but it will be a long scroll. And so we took I was reading Cry, Stall, Gaze, and then I was reading from some section of the long poem. And then Ambrose, in this piece that I'll play for you, somehow collages these together. So you'll hear some of those lines I just read. Cry, stall, gaze, crystal gaze, but spelled out cry, stall, gaze. And the notion also that I think the impulse was sort of scrying. I thought I was scrying into Pat's work when I was, responding. And and in her, especially in her large paintings, you walk into them and it's really like, you know, a whole environment that you enter. And so you know, sort of just being in the space of her work. Did you work with her? Or do you know her in some way? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I've just seen him and admired him for a while.
Yeah, wonderful. Was she, you know, she also studied in China and Japan and studied, I can't remember the technical term, but this kind of ink splatter work, and goes way back.
Is it Sumi?
There's Sumi, but there's also another term for this spattering of ink. Maybe it's referenced in our notes. Okay, so let's hear Remember Kate. And just back to Remember Talia. It's the very last one, 11. Yeah. Den Titcherus. Den Talia. Den Titcherus. Denudate. Deontology. Deorbit. Etesian. Winds. Etherify. In utero. Naropa. Line and flash. Carpet of Chinese origin under the sea. Annals. Vase nocturnal substratal culture on it. Time the injunction of liberty. Sakha, such ashen. Antique hair ornament. A feather. A chalice. What country did you enter with your manner and your custom? Your attitude, your sumptuous gardens. Guide men, women, whose nerves, prodigious part, and how the figure points more to civilian west. Then I went round, then what? Then what? I went forth round, then what? And I went round, then what? Remember Cana, then what? Remember your rose and vision, what? Attending today, poet, I'll write here, minds light, and I land representation, and I went a blueprint, a miasma, and I was right, oh blue, and I went corporate, not to dismiss what won't abstraction collapsed together in arms, where language thinks I'm serious. We're going to do something like this here in the gallery, and thank you so much, Lucy. And walk to this great space.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Well, come on
And the
back.
tech worked.
Oh, I was going to say we need to thank Charles James. We have many awesome volunteers who come out of the woodworks like angels and save us all the time. You want to be one? Sign up. And you want to find out more about amazing events like this? Sign up. And once again, thank you, Anne. That was really stunning.